Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Post Up with David Grubb. I, of course, am David Grubb here on Boo Crew Media. Thank you for joining me today. You know, as a journalist and as an analyst, it is my job each day to report stories and explain their impact. But a lot of times I get asked by fans and in the comment section, what would you do? So today, I'm going to focus on giving you my thoughts and my ideas on how I would fix the New Orleans Pelicans and a few other things around the NBA. My way may not be the way. I'm not saying that's the case, but I think these are realistic paths to improve this team, the team that I cover, and fix the sport that I love. Of course, there are plenty of factors that go into this. Look, there's the human factor, there's what people want to decide, and there's plenty of other player movement that could happen around the NBA that would impact this idea. And this could be just the pipe dreams of somebody, of a delusional observer, but let's give it a shot. Here we go. All right, I'm going to start with the New Orleans Pelicans. And if you're going to fix anything, I can't deal with the coaching or the front office. That's not my job. That's not my decision. But if I were in charge of sticking to player moves in order to restructure this roster that already has some talent, but also has a lot of challenges, the big thing is that you start off with, and yes, I understand that, you've seen the reports that the Bucks, that Giannis Antetokounmpo wants to stay where he is, or in the Eastern Conference, that he wants to, look at teams like Brooklyn or Toronto. But certainly the Bucks are going to do what's best for the Bucks. They would love to send Giannis to where he wants to go, a la what they did for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he asked to go to the West Coast, sending him to Los Angeles Lakers. But let's suppose that the Bucks and the Pelicans are able to strike a deal as part of a 3-team deal. So in this version, the Pelicans don't get a lot of player talent back, but they do get flexibility. The Bucks would send Giannis to San Antonio. In exchange, the Spurs would send current Rookie of the Year Stephon Castle, the expiring contract of Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, another talented young player, and this year's 2025 number 2 pick. And the Pelicans would ship out the Bucks' 2026 pick back to Milwaukee. The Pelicans then, in return, would get the number 14 pick in this year's draft, along with another pick in 2027, an unprotected first-round pick from the Atlanta Hawks in 2027. That would be shipped and routed to the Pelicans. What that would give is the Pelicans 2 first-rounders this year, 7 and 14, 2 lottery picks. They would still hold on to that 2026 first-round pick from Indiana, that top 4 protected pick from the Indiana Pacers. And they would keep that 2027 Bucks pick as well. And you pick up another first rounder from the Atlanta Hawks, a team that routinely finishes in that 8, 9, 10 spot, maybe lower as seasons to come. So I think what you do is you address multiple needs in this draft. You can take a perimeter player and a center. You could take your center at 7 in Kaman Malawak, get your 7'2" player, your rim protector right there in the draft, and you still have flexibility at 14 to stock your perimeter or take whatever kind of flyer you want at 14 and still get a lottery talent player in that position. You also have the flexibility of packaging those picks and maybe moving up or, using those picks as part of another player deal. I think what you want is flexibility when you're the New Orleans Pelicans because of how we're going to move forward as I continue. So the next step I'm moving is we've got to get CJ McCollum off the roster. CJ going into the final year of his contract. There are teams that could use a veteran with his shooting ability. So where do you send him? The most likely candidate, I would think, is the Orlando Magic. So you take that CJ deal, you send him to Orlando for a package of Cole Anthony, Mo Wagner, Jett Howard, and Corey Joseph. In Cole Anthony, you get a good young point guard who still could be ascending, a guy who can score the basketball, can get into the paint, has a lot of skills. And Mo Wagner, you get somebody as a stretch 4 or stretch 5 who has a lot of talent, can knock down the outside shot. Jett Howard, another guy with good perimeter shooting ability at 6'8", giving you length at the small forward or even a stretch 4 position. And then Corey Joseph, a serviceable backup point guard for a team that needs depth. You're able to release Elfrid Payton, who, while again, he can pass the basketball, is extremely limited in the way he can impact the game in other ways, as well as his defense. So you've moved that on, and I've solved my point guard problem for the immediate future. Now the Pelicans are in the position that they can be patient with the return of DeJounte Murray. You don't need him on the court. You're not pressing him to rehab quickly because you have a couple of point guards in place now, and depending on what you do in the draft. So you take DeJounte Murray aside as he recovers. If he's good to go in January or February or, whenever, now you can look at him as either an intriguing piece to add back to your roster, or you have him for the flexibility of making him another trade chip, because certainly if he's healthy and you give him his audition when he returns, he becomes a potential trade chip for another team, whether at this year's trade deadline or in the offseason for next year. They're giving the Pelicans even more flexibility. The next thing you do if you're the New Orleans Pelicans is you go out and you chase down Kevon Looney. With Wagner in the fold as your stretch five, the Pelicans can go after a championship veteran who does all the little things at the center position. Great screener, solid defender, solid rebounder, high basketball IQ, plenty of physicality, and you have a mentor for your younger bigs like Kaman Malawak, like Yves Missi. So now you've got a stocked front court. You've got height, you've got strength, you've got athleticism in your front court, and you've got experience balancing things out. It makes Kelly Olynyk, because again, remember, you've already acquired Mo Wagner to be your stretch big. Certainly you're giving up the experience that Olynyk has and his ability to be a connector within your offense. But I think what you're gaining is even better, because you don't want to overstock with the same types of players in your front court. Because remember, you also have the potential of Zion Williamson still playing some minutes as your small ball four, though the Pelicans are moving him increasingly out to the perimeter as a three or as a point guard for Zion Williamson in his role. So Kelly Olynyk and his contract become much more expendable for the Pelicans, allowing you again to use Olynyk to bring back more draft assets. And that's what you want to do as the Pelicans, is continue to add to your flexibility. If it's a down the road first with protections, fine. Kelly Olynyk's not part of your long-term plans anyway. If it's for another player that you need, fine. Because again, Kelly Olynyk's not part of your plans. With those moves alone, and the return of a Herb Jones, who you really, the organization really likes and is inexpensive. You still have your young players on the roster. You keep, for those who believe in the potential of Jordan Hawkins, you haven't given him away. You're able to decide then. You haven't given away Brandon Boston, though you still have a team option, and I would advise the Pelicans, if they asked me, and they're not, but I would reject the team option for Brandon Boston too while he recovers from injury, and you can find out if he's healthy later, because I don't think another team's going to come in and swoop him away from you after he recovers from injury. And I know this overall isn't a very sexy approach, but I think it's a winning one. When you talk about sustaining consistent success for the Pelicans, I think that's a winning combination of moves. It allows you to see what this team is in the short term. It allows you to be very competitive. I think that is a competitive roster. A healthy Trey Murphy, a healthy Herb Jones, a healthy Zion Williamson, along with these other acquisitions, Mo Wagner, Corey Joseph, Anthony, all these players. I think you've got a very competitive team. You're not winning a championship next year, but what you want to do is start making progress. I believe this is a team that allows you to make a lot of progress. And then what you have is, again, flexibility in the 2026 and 2027 drafts, which I think are both better potentially than this draft, and allows you to be, again, in the middle of moves and be able to focus on improving your roster relatively quickly. You have the assets now to, if you want to go all in with Zion Williamson, if he proves to you that he's healthy and competent and ready to commit himself to New Orleans, and you're getting the best out of Zion and he stays healthy, if that's the scenario that plays out, and I know people are going to say, how unlikely is that? But if it does play out, you have to allow for that possibility. If that does play out, then you're able to make an all-in move the next offseason to go and acquire a star to go alongside this group And you know a lot more about the players you have and how they fit around Zion, or if they don't. And then you also, let's say it doesn't work. Let's say Zion cannot stay healthy. You still start this season with him. And then at the trade deadline, because of that contract, you don't want to give him away without knowing what you have. You still have that opportunity. Remember, so even at the trade deadline, if you decided that he's no longer the player that you want to build around, the next team that acquires him still has him for more than 2 years under their control. And that's an attractive option because of the ability to get out from his contract if he disappoints. But somebody is going to bet on his potential until he proves that he can't produce at the NBA level, whether it's because of his physicality and his inability to stay on the floor, or for whatever reason. Somebody's going to bet on his talent. So I don't think you have to be, again, and when I talk about these, you want to be deliberate and not desperate. And I don't think any of those are desperate moves, but I think those are quality moves that build you a foundation for multiple pathways in the future. And it's always good to have options in life, is it not? All right. One of the big things that people ask me about is the draft. I hate the draft. I hate the lottery. It doesn't work. I am a person too. I hate drafts of all kinds. I think drafts are anti-labor. And I think they reward incompetence in front offices, no matter the sport. NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, drafts reward incompetence because of the inverse structure of them. You put bad teams at the front. And you say, well, how is a bad team going to acquire talent? You want to disincentivize being bad. Teams that are allowed to be bad and get rewarded for being bad. I give to you again the example of the Los Angeles Clippers under Donald Sterling. His entire business approach was built on never being too good, because being too good requires you to invest money. If you're close to a championship, fans and players demand that you continue to make that push. But if you're consistently either bad, you can make money in the NBA being consistently bad. Owners will tell you they're losing money. No owner has ever lost money. Look at the sale prices of these teams. Nobody's losing money on these deals, not with the TV revenue covering all your expenses for the year before you play a game, basically. Things like a stadium revenue, things like concessions, parking, all those things, that's money that teams want to hold on to. But by and large, they are making their profit before a ball ever bounces on the court. It's amazing to me, otherwise, philosophically, that in a country that we talk about freedom of choice, and that's what we want, the ability to choose our path in life, and you would never accept in your own life somebody putting your career in the hands of an incompetent executive. That people are just fine with doing that with the careers of elite athletes. We want, as fans, to see the best athletes at their best. And if you pair the wrong athlete with the wrong organization, or the right athlete with the wrong organization, things don't change. You end up seeing careers squandered, sometimes in obscurity, sometimes due to the ineffectiveness of the organization, sometimes due to the ineffectiveness of coaching, sometimes just because the player never pans out. And it hamstrings the organization, it hamstrings the player, it ruins careers more often than it helps them succeed. The draft is an idea that gets sold to young athletes as a rite of passage, as the thing that they should aspire to. But fundamentally, I believe that the draft is something that they use to control players, and it allows owners in particular to have as much control of the process as possible, trying to minimize their risk while rewarding them, again, for their incompetence or their inability to put together a good team. So what I propose, and again, the results, let me before I get to that, let me say this again. I think the results of the draft also speak for themselves. Top picks in the NBA in particular rarely, if ever, win championships with the team that draft them. Since 1997, we're talking almost 30 years of evidence, only 2 number 1 picks have won an NBA championship with the team that originally drafted them. Those players are Tim Duncan in 1997 and Kyrie Irving. And I know people are going to say LeBron James, and I have to tell people all the time that LeBron left and came back. He was not the same player. He had already won championships in Miami when he returned to Cleveland. So that's not the same. I don't consider that the same. And, his leverage was much different. They weren't building a team from scratch. They were able to make trades, i.e. the Kevin Love deal with Minnesota, and you already had another number one pick in Kyrie Irving in place. So it was not the team he came in with in 2003. So what I would like to see is a draft pool where players who are eligible for the draft are designated into two different tiers, tier 1 and tier 2, based on their draft grades. When they come out, you do the combine, you get all your stuff, you have your player grades, just like they do now. You get your player grades and you separate players into tier 1 and tier 2. Teams get awarded pools of money. They're assigned a pool of money based on their records. So you're still giving the worst teams a chance by giving them more money in their pool than the than the best teams in the league. But all teams are limited to a maximum of one tier 1 and one tier 2 in any draft, in any, free agency period. The player rights, though, are open. And what this does, it puts the onus on the individual franchises to get better, to have competent front offices, to do a good job of player acquisition, and you cannot tank. There's no incentive for you to tank now, because basically it's like college in some regards. And players have now the option to interview teams and see if the offense works for them, if the philosophy of building them up and developing them works for them, if the coach and that player are compatible in the way that they communicate to each other. The team has to sell itself and the player has to sell themselves. And now you don't worry about this player dropping to a certain position and making less money. You don't worry about this player and moving those rights. What teams would still be able to do is move their pool. So if I don't want a first round pick this year, or you want my first round pick, my tier 1 option, then you can trade those options so that a team can have 2 tier 1 pools. And then another team loses one. So I think that you remain balanced in that regard, and you're still able to make moves that you can make trades for. You can trade an established player for a tier 1 pool, or a tier 2 pool, or multiple tier 2 pools in different years. However those combinations work, the same as draft picks, but what you're doing is extending a team's pool to go after players. So if a bad team wants to go out and send out talent, they have a star that they no longer are compatible with, they send their player out and add to their tier 1 pool, which is already, again, larger than the best team in the league. And I think that incentivizes teams in order for them to show and present to that talent coming into the league that, hey, this is the place for you. This is where you should want to play, because you don't want to see, no one wants to see players when they get selected looking frustrated or disappointed by the team that they took. Imagine, if you will, a national signing day where all this stuff is taking place, where teams are allowed an interview period to meet with players. And then on one particular day, players and teams make their decisions and line up. I think that's really an exciting option for the NBA moving forward. I think it's something that people would enjoy. I think fan bases would get behind it. And I think they would find a lot of interest in developing their rosters that way. Do I think owners are willing to do that? Probably not. It would take a lot of leverage from the players union in order for something like that to happen. But if you're looking for solutions to tanking, sure, flattening odds has done some of that, but I think it allows for what we've seen, where you have these interpretations of whether or not the NBA draft lottery is fixed and whether there's a favorable status for other teams. And you could say, well, the teams in small markets will never be able to compete. But you have to remember, there's still only a certain amount of spots on any roster. And the same personnel rules apply. The salary cap is still in place. You can't just be cutting people off your roster because you still have dead cap numbers. So you're not going to see a hoarding of talent in one place, because quite frankly, these young players are not going to take less money than what's available to them. You're still going to see players chasing the most money. And if I've got 2 tier 1 pools of money to throw at one guy, then that makes my team more attractive to them. If I can throw minutes There's two things players value above anything else: money and minutes. If I'm offering you a place to play as a rookie, rather than you sitting on the bench potentially for 2 or 3 years because you can see what a team already has on its roster, then that coach has to explain to you how you're going to be utilized. And if you don't like it, you can move on. And you say, that's a disaster for a team with bad coach. Exactly. It's a disaster for a team with a bad front office. Exactly. There are always going to be bad teams. You cannot prevent there being bad teams in the league. But what you want to disincentivize is being cheap and being bad. If you want talent, you can't just get it because you got the pick, because you ended up second or third in the lottery. You can't get it that way anymore. You've got to go out as an ownership group, as a front office, wherever your team is, and prove to young players in particular, this is where they want to be. And I think you get a better, more competitive NBA as we see the league slip and slide further away from competition, as we see entertainment become a bigger stake of the game rather than the individual competition that happens on the court. And you minimize some of these opportunities to ruin young careers because a player gets sent to sit on a bench somewhere where they could be active for another team, a contributor for another team. Look, you've seen it where players have left major Division I programs in football or basketball and gone to smaller schools because they were going to get playing time. Because what players want is to get to that third contract. They want to get to that third contract. And the only way you get to do that is by getting some stats. So sitting on the bench for the first 2 years of your rookie contract is not very alluring to them. And I think this addresses that. Is it the perfect solution? There's no perfect solution, but I think it could be a good one. All right. Another issue has often been fixing the season. Do you need more games? Do you need fewer games? How do you fix this? How do you make it work? Here's my proposal. I'd like to see the schedule reduced to 72 games. 3 versus your conference opponents. That gives you 42 games right there. Then 2 versus your non-conference opponents. That's 30 more for your 72. I'm splitting the season in half to 2 36-game sessions. And I'm bringing back what's known as the 7-point system. If you know about the Continental Basketball Association, it was a league that preceded the NBA in its founding and eventually turned into the top minor league of professional basketball in the United States. It ended up getting swallowed up. And you can look at the history of this. Isaiah Thomas was the last commissioner/owner. He bought all the teams in the CBA. And eventually the NBA saw that as competition, and they created what was first the D League and is now the G League. But the 7-point system was something that the CBA utilized. And I'm going to explain that now. In the 7-point system, in each game, 7 points are awarded. 3 for winning the game and 1 point for winning a quarter. If 2 teams score the same amount of points in a quarter, that point gets cut in half and split between the 2. Team standings ultimately get determined by the number of points you earn rather than just straight up win-loss percentage. Again, this incentivizes competition. Winning quarters is important. Winning the game is important. These things matter for your point totals. What you do by splitting the season as well, I'm doubling the awards. I've got a first half MVP. I've got a first half defensive player of the year. I've got a first half all NBA team. I've got I'm doing it that way because what we've seen too as the league has gotten more and more talented is that it's much harder to fill out these all NBA teams, all rookie teams, et cetera, because there are too many players available who can put together outstanding seasons who never earn recognition. Does it do people look back in the past and say, how does this impact prior awards? It doesn't. It doesn't matter. The rules were the rules then. We change the rules all the time and we reevaluate things. We cannot be burdened and stuck on the past and continue to add tradition just for tradition's sake. Just because something has been around all the time doesn't mean that that's the way you have to do it. So what I'm doing also to make the season a little more interesting is I'm putting the in-season tournament in the middle of that. I'm doing my first 36 games. I'm taking a break. And I'm playing my in-season tournament in that break so that I'm not doing on-site games Or if I am doing on-site games, they're not in the middle of real games. So you do your on-site games, you do your pool play, and then you move to your finals as you did before. And I think the in-season tournament then becomes far more interesting, right? If it's all taking place at one time, now I can focus on this as a fan. I'm watching the in-season tournament take place in real time, and I'm watching these teams advance, boom, 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 like March Madness. Rather than 2 games interspersed within your regular schedule, all of a sudden a new court pops up. You play in these games. They don't matter to your standings, or they do depending on how you finish. No, we're just going to end that, and you're just going to play the tournament straight up. Whoever wins, wins the NBA Cup, and it's right there in the middle of the season. I'm also moving the NBA Finals to neutral site. I'm allowing cities to bid on the NBA Finals because teams around the league, they're teams that will never make an NBA Finals. But if you have a destination, it's better for television because they get to set up in one place, right? They get to have their entire operation in one place. You've seen it. Look at the Final Four in New Orleans, how much equipment had to be brought and how early it had to be brought into the city of New Orleans. Just for the Final Four, that's 2 games. 3 games over 2 nights. But if you had the NBA Finals in one place, TV is getting a better deal. Fans know from year to year where the finals are going to be, so more fans have access to the finals in those games. You become a bigger event. You own a city, and you're getting all the attention in this one place. I'm not traveling from across the country. If I've got a West Coast team and an East Coast team, the travel is mitigated for the players. I think that that's better for them. You're not creating a bubble because fans are there, but you are creating an event. You've got an entire maybe week or 2 weeks of events that you can have in your city, and these teams are there, and you're taking them into markets that may never experience a finals. New Orleans suddenly becomes a hub where every 4 years you're not just getting Super Bowls, you're getting NBA Finals too. Whether your team's there or not, you get a chance to see the very best teams go at it in your city. I think those are really cool ways to impact the season. Again, give me your thoughts and your feedback below. I'm just throwing out some ideas that I think could be cool. Lastly, how do you deal with All-Star Weekend? I'm moving the game to the end of the season because I've got my in-season tournament is now my feature in the main part of the season. The All-Star Game's competitiveness is gone, just like how the NFL has basically moved the Pro Bowl to that week before the Super Bowl, and it doesn't really matter anymore. We're not a fan of All-Star games anymore. They don't serve a purpose anymore. You can still have the All-Star weekend and those events, but again, now they're in a different place, and they're at the end of the season. You've got more players who now have made it through the season. You know who's available. You're not dealing with mid-season injuries. You don't have to worry of coaches thinking about sending guys or holding players back. You've got an entire season's worth of data and stats in order to determine who the All-Star teams are. The 15-man rosters. If you have 15-man rosters, then more players instead of 12 are making the All-Star game. You let players still compete in the 3-point contest. But here's another change that I would like, and that's the dunk contest. I get to change the dunk contest, and instead of NBA players, I'm taking them out of the loop. What am I doing with the dunk contest? I'm doing regional dunk contests, where people from cities, you represent your city, your NBA city, the best dunker in New York City, the best dunker in Chicago, the professional dunkers out there, all these great, amazing dunkers that you get to watch on social media, but you never get to see in your arena, guys who have turned this into an art form. They represent their cities, and throughout the season, you set these little opportunities. I don't know if some of y'all are old enough to remember the Foot Locker slam dunk contest where they had athletes compete over several weeks. And, I think the event was in one place, but split out as a TV event. But I think with this, the way you do this is you allow regional contests. So New York, San Antonio, like your division, send their representatives to this one place, or you do it via video. You got to figure out the details, but they put their best dunks, and fans get to vote on who moves forward up until that All-Star weekend, where you get to a pool of 8 dunkers at All-Star weekend, these professionals, and you let the All-Stars be the judges along with the fan vote. think that is a really cool way to improve the slam dunk contest. All right, those are my ideas. Fixing the Pelicans, fixing the draft, fixing the NBA season, and fixing All-Star weekend. Give me your thoughts. Give me your comments. Give me your feedback. I'd love to hear it and hear your ideas as well. If you got cool ones, I'll talk about those on the next episode, and we'll bring some of those out. So throw your ideas at the wall too. Let's see what you've got. But these are mine, and I want to know what you think. That'll do it for today's episode. We'll have more Pelican-centric stuff as well next week, but I thought this was a fun diversion while we don't have a whole bunch of news to report. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, share it with your friends and your family if they love basketball too. And don't forget to follow me on social media at DM Grubb on X, on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you do your social media. And don't forget to follow Boo Crew as well, Boo Crew Media as well. So I will see you next week. Y'all have a great weekend. And until the next time, go Pels.